Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is Monday, February 13th, and we are starting out here with week 3. You have finished up your second round of assignments and submissions, finishing out the 2D platformer composition, and we have a couple of video submissions with the finalized audio and music that a couple of folks have submitted on FSO, and we will take a listen to those. So this first Monday session of the week will be like the rest of our sessions, where we'll take a listen to some of the previous week's projects and submissions, and then we will get into the new week 3 assignments. So we do have a new game and a new game project underway for week 3, starting out the kind of the second half of the month here. So we will dive into those compositions in the second half of our class. So if you have any questions, it looks like everybody was able to successfully submit all of their material. I took a bit longer than I wanted to get back the grades for the 2D platformer composition. I tried to get those back earlier in the week, and since I was unable to do that, I did push off the deadline for the 2D platformer composition description, where you are able to take everything that you did in the previous round and make any changes, update it, and submit it one more time with the finished video. So if I get any more submissions in the peer review, maybe we'll start the next session out with those also. But let's go ahead and take a listen to some of the videos I have. Let's see. Keep that tab open. Hold on here. My wealth of video tabs. Hold on, I've got 2 YouTube submissions. I can combine those together. And I've got 2 videos here. So we got a total of 4 videos to check out. I will start with, well, Courtney, since you're here, we'll start with yours. And I would need to switch my output so that we can all hear this. So I'm going to video a little bit, the volume of the video, just to make sure that this works just fine. So in week 2, you created all of the sound effects for 2D platformer, and then you took all of your music and your sound effects and placed them in the game in a very particular folder, location, and tested out your game. So, Courtney, did you have any issues getting the whole process working? Any challenges in making it work? Did it work as expected once you created and bounced out your music? Often there is a process of trial and error, or you have an intention and you compose your music, you bounce it all out and you put it into the game, and what you might have expected may not actually be what ends up happening when it plays back in the game. So whether it's the looping of the files, or how it transitions from one to the next, or the different variations, shifting from an intro through a main loop through an ending. Sometimes it's mix between music and sound effects. There's often in a game, the sound effects are at a louder volume than the music. Dialogue is typically king in a movie and in a video game, where it tells the story. Sound effects often tell a lot of the information, and the music is often there as subtext to give information on the emotional context of the scene. So the balance of music versus sound effects is often up for discussion, and since we are really focused on the music composition, maybe the music should be more at the forefront when balanced back and forth. Here in the chat, the only issue I had was not being able to drop the bombs. I was trying to right-click to set the bombs, and it wasn't doing anything, unless I wasn't playing the game right. There is a possibility where if the sounds are not formatted correctly or not in the right place, or there's something wrong with that file, it may actually stop the action in the game. Meaning that if the game does not find the file for some reason, then there's a possibility that you would not be able to pick up the bomb or drop the bomb, or if the health pickup sound was incorrect, maybe the health pickup wouldn't work, or maybe you couldn't fire the weapon. It actually set up so that all of the assets need to be there, the graphics, the sound, and the programming that's running everything in the background. So that can be an issue at times, where if the sound is not found by the game, that it won't actually function correctly, which is a possibility. So there is the question of the technical aspect of getting it all to work, getting everything to play back. There is the creative aspect of your choice of music and the appropriateness, and how does it play against the changes in the gameplay. And there's the mix aspect of balancing all of the music versus the sound effects. So there's a couple layers of complexity involved in all of this, and it's not really until you put all of the music and sound effects into the game that you end up testing it and seeing how it all works and getting the big picture of everything, which often then means another pass of updating it, improving the sounds, which is really often just a bit of tweaks overall to the music and sound to make it work properly. So let's see that this plays. I'm going to play it and mess with the volume just to make sure it's working in the broadcast, and then we'll go through these videos. All right, that looks like it's broadcasting. Are you able to hear that and still hear my microphone?
Feel the burn.
Excellent. So we'll let the video play for a bit.
I'm giving her all she's got.
Bada bada bing bang.
Feel the burn.
Bada bada bing bang.
I'm giving her all she's got.
All right, the music ties very well together from one file to the next. It links nicely.
Bada bing bang.
The sound effects work great against the overall scene and what's going on in the action. Did you record most of the vocals, or did you find those in the library somewhere? I think the dialogue, the voice samples could maybe come out and be a little bit louder overall. Excellent, you recorded the vocals. So yeah, maybe those could come out in the mix and be a little bit more present, but they definitely work. It's a lot of fun.
Feel the burn.
All right, ties nicely. Starts over again. All right, excellent.
Feel the burn.
So I think functionally everything works together very well. Just a couple of tweaks, maybe bring those that dialogue up a bit. The gunshot works well. Did you pull that out of a library, or did you record any of the other sound effects? So I think the balance of everything works very nicely between the music and the sound effects, and the music transitions well. Kind of everything fits and pieces together. well for the game. There's an element of like I said before, the creative aspect of the approach with the music, the choice of sound effects, and building and layering and recording your sound effects, and then there is the implementation of how it actually works in the game. Does everything piece together nicely? Does it layer against each other well? And definitely fits together in an appropriate way. For the gunshot, that was from the library with different layers. Excellent. So a good example to start with. Let's go ahead and listen to these two examples on YouTube. I think these are going to play just in the same way. Let's get this going. All right. So this one doesn't have any music. It's missing the music layer, and the sound effects. It sounds like this might have been recorded through the internal speaker on the laptop. Because it doesn't sound like a full recording, full kind of capture, like full bandwidth capture you can kind of hear clicking in the background. So I did want to address this, the setup for using loopback with this assignment. More than likely, let's see if I can get, well, I can just say I wanted to capture that. So for this assignment, you're using QuickTime and an application called Loopback to do the screen recording. And here in the QuickTime setup, more than likely, this was set to the built-in microphone, and it was playing out of the computer speakers, playing back into the internal mic. Instead, you need to use a program called Loopback, and the assignment goes through the steps of setting all of this up. But once you turn on and enable a Loopback input, and you look in QuickTime, you should have an input here named Loopback Audio. And you have to unmute it, and you typically want to monitor through the built-in output or your headphones, or your audio interface, or whatever you typically listen to. That way, all of the captures are internal, and it sounds more like the previous example, which sounds correct in stereo. And but this one here, let's jump back to. Oh, I've got too many windows going. Hold on. Back here. It basically feels band limited overall. So definitely want to take the right approach. Now, for the sound design works. Sounds like everything is properly set up. The dialogue works very nicely. Fits well. The gunshot works well. Jumps. Yeah, I think I can hear the TV in the background, which means it was recorded from a microphone. So definitely make sure you get the music into the project. Make sure that you use Loopback to capture everything, and that will complete the video. We'll try the next one here. Let's turn this down and listen to this one.
Let's see what you got.
All right. So there was a big pause there in the beginning before the music turned on.
Let's see what you got.
Which means more than likely that there's a gap at the beginning of the file, which prevents it from playing back correctly. Music is much louder than the sound effects. And then the music kind of stops, waiting for the loop, because there's that gap again in the file, and then it's going to start up. So let's see. So the capture is correct. You're using loopback or some internal audio connection to capture it properly. But the playback of the files aren't set up correctly. Double check how your audio files are edited to make sure that there are no gaps, that files loop correctly, there is no kind of interruptions in the playback. And then balance the music versus the sound effects a bit more so that the sound effects can be heard against the music. And one more, right? Let's see, we got this one. Let's listen to another one.
Yes? Ow! 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 Ow!
All right, endings work well.
Yes? Yes?
All right. It looks like everything works properly. Let's jump back over here. Everything is captured properly. Music and sound effects are playing back. Intros, main loops, and endings work well to transition. I was listening for maybe a little bit more variation in the different main loops. I was trying to identify where the changes were, and it really feels quite consistent. And I was wondering if it was choosing the same cue over again. I wasn't hearing much variation from one to the next. But intros and endings definitely had more energy and variation to them. So I think everything technically works. I think the music and the sound effects balance pretty well. Here in the chat, Courtney, I like the little laugh. Yeah, like all the little vocal sound effects and the jumps work and the ouches, and sounds like everything works and fits the overall kind of theme of the game. So nice work. So we got to see a couple of variations there. We got the full kind of picture with the music, the sound effects, the implementation. One of the things, elements of the assignment that I cannot build in and guarantee, but I actually approve of, is a little bit of trial and error. Hopefully you don't get it exactly right the first time. If you do, then excellent. You are even more, you're capable of taking a project and kind of tearing it apart into its aspects and understanding kind of the end goal. But if there's a little bit of trial and error in the process of creating the music, putting it into the game, and things not really working right, but being able to identify what is not correct and kind of work out some solutions to those issues, that is where a lot of game music and game audio is done, because there's the first version of anything that I throw out to the team and that I throw into the game really often does not work. Very rarely is the first thing I throw up there like, oh, that's perfect, first time, every time. It really doesn't work that way. So a bit of trial and error in the whole process, but understanding and realizing what the issues are and being able to go back and fix them to update it is a great approach. So always good to see those submissions. If you have a submission from either 2D platformer or Angry Bots that you want to take a look at through in our next session, we can definitely do that. So we are going to introduce our new assignments for week 3. And as I said, a new game requires a new type of music, a new approach to that music, and a new set of sound effects also. So let's introduce our second game of the month, a game called Angry Bots. And it's a publicly available game. It is made by the Unity game, by Unity Games, using the Unity game engine, which is the same set of tools that our previous game, 2D Platformer, is built from. It's kind of like saying I recorded my album in Pro Tools or Logic. Saying I built my game in the Unity game engine is really quite common. You can download Angry Bots. I think it's still available in the iOS App Store and the Android or Google Play Store. So it is a publicly, freely available game that is used, again, to demonstrate and show off the tools available in the Unity game engine. And we used it for our own purposes to create a system for music and sound effects and allow you to design your own soundtrack to the game, setting up the music in a particular way for playback in the game. So I'm going to let the video roll here for a moment, take a quick pause, but we will get into how you are going to create the music soundtrack for this game. All right. So as we saw, a different type of game, certainly going to take a different musical approach than a 2D platformer. Our last game was really meant for kind of all ages, family-friendly game. This one might be a more restricted or an older audience. In general, it's it's a kind of a darker, grittier game. You are a mercenary infiltrating the robot factory, and the robots certainly do not like that, and they are out to attack you. And it is all about battling and kind of engaging with these different robots as you progress through the game level. And Angry Bots is a much more full and complete game than a 2D platformer. 2D platformer really just kept going and going. The same idea as the score got higher and higher. Angry Bots is a complete game level that would be a part of a much larger game. Currently, it takes about 10 minutes or so to get through the Angry Bots level, and the sound effects and music that we create in the beginning portion, like that first minute or so that you saw of game action, it kind of continues with all of the music and sound effects through the rest of the game. So we'll talk about how the music is used in this game, the overall style and approach of the music, and we will talk about then we'll get into some examples of how you might work with this. So let's start with the kind of the style and the theme of the game. Let me do this. I want to bring up the video and just kind of have it running in the background at a low or no volume. Bring this up and set it onto loop. Okay, and just let that roll. The overall approach for this is really focused on the idea of ambient and action. We're going to talk about the concept of game states, but a game state is what is happening in the game at any one time. And the two key things that we're going to use to drive the music is the idea of ambient and action. You'll see that there are all of these kind of battles with these robots. They're a lot of them. They're fast, but the battles are really kind of short and quick. So you're going to engage in a lot of enemies quite quickly, but they're going to come and go at a fast pace. So our music needs to be able to respond to this. And the real challenge of this composition is being able to shift back and forth between ambient and action in some sort of way that makes sense. So let's start out with ambient, or the idea or concept or game state of ambient. Now, I don't mean the genre of ambient music. This is not just going to be a slow pad or drone that doesn't change or do anything, or I don't mean the sound effects of ambiences either. This is not rain or wind or the backgrounds or sound effects. Ambient is a piece of music. All ambient means in this term is, or in this context, is that it's less than action. Your ambient cue can have drums, and it can have bass, and it can be loud and strong, just as long as the action cue is even bigger and louder and stronger than that. One of the main key elements of this composition that we're listening for is the difference between ambient and action. Ambient can have power to it just as long as the action is even bigger and stronger than that. So, the ambient cue. Ambient cue is heard if nothing else is happening in the game. When the game starts, the ambient cue starts playing. Your ambient piece of music is going to be somewhere between 1 minute and 2 minutes long. It's going to be the most commonly heard piece of music. That's why we make it long. So if the player is doing nothing else but just sitting there, then they will hear this ambient cue. And if they just stood in a corner, at least it's a minute-long piece of music that will constantly morph and change. So your ambient cue should have energy to it. It should have detail to it. It should not just be one idea that sits there for a minute. The ambient cue is a great place for what I often term as musical sound design, which is taking your instruments and using them in ways that are more kind of a sound design approach than a traditional composition approach. You don't necessarily have to think about this composition in drums, bass, harmony, melody. Being a much more kind of a futuristic style, you can go in a lot of different directions with your electronic instruments, your drum machines, your synths, your samplers, effects processors, especially in the ambient cue. You can you can have low pads and drones as an element, but you should also have bass lines that morph and change over time. You can have a chord progression, or you can have tones that kind of mix their way in and out of the overall progression over time. You should have things come in and out of the mix, change, and have variation and kind of evolve over the course of this minute or two. You can use effects processors, big reverbs and delays and reverses and stutters and gated effects, arpeggiated effects. There's just a lot of fun toys that you can play with to kind of head in this direction of musical sound design. Then the action cues. Let's do this. I want to bring up the PDF here. For this assignment, along with this assignment, you will get the Angry Bots PDF. And it describes a lot about ambient and action, how the files are set up, and a couple of reference tracks to listen to. Information about the musical style and suggested instrumentation, high energy with over-the-top modern production styles, fast electronic, epic metal. We're really listening for big and strong and intense music, and the shift back and forth between in levels of intensity. Music system, this is really what I'm going to be discussing here. Kind of summarizes what the topics that I'll be getting into as I describe the different elements. Different cue themes. You are going to have the ambient loop, which is about a minute or two long. And then each robot is going to have a different action theme that is going to be 8 bars long, or an 8-bar loop. This is really what I want to get to, which will describe all of that. The asset list here describes a total of 7 files that you will be creating for this composition. And those files, we said, we have the ambient cue. We've already described that, but I want to get into these 3 action cues. There is going to be an action cue that is 8 bars long for each one of the robots that you encounter, each one of the types of robots that you encounter. So let's talk about those. The first robot that you encounter is called the Buzzer Bot. It is this flying robot that has electricity blast, almost like a lightning blast here, that it attacks. If it gets close enough, it zaps you. And you will have one 8-bar piece of music that plays when you encounter those robots. The next one here is called the Spider Bot. It's basically a bomb on legs. It kind of tracks you and gets closer and closer in proximity. And if it gets close enough, it will explode. So you either shoot it from a distance, or if it sits right next to you, it'll eventually detonate, right like this. And the spider bots are the most frequent enemies that you encounter in the game. The third type of robot is called the Mech Bot. So if I fast forward over here, it's this big RoboCop-looking robot as it comes down the hallway here. There it is. It shoots missiles at you. It would kind of be considered like the boss battle of this part of the game. And it takes a little bit longer to defeat. It's the biggest and strongest one of the robots, and so the music that correlates with that or corresponds with that particular robot would be big and strong also. So we have... Where'd it go? There we go. We have an 8-bar cue for each one of the pieces of music, or sorry, for each one of the robots. Each time you encounter one of those robots, it will stop playing the ambient cue and immediately switch over to the action cue. So let's talk about how it goes back and forth between ambient and action, because this is really where the challenge becomes in making this kind of a one cohesive piece of music. So when the game starts, the ambient cue plays. And like I said before, if nothing else happens, then that ambient loop will go around and around and play. The question is how does the game know how and when to switch over to the action cues? And the simple answer is it happens when you're in battle, when you're fighting with one of the robots. So then how do we define what a battle is, and when does the battle start and end? And the way the game uses this, the way the game determines how the battle starts and ends, is through health points. Either the character's health points, the main player's health points, or the robot that you are fighting. Now, the game always knows which robots are active, like which ones are on screen and which ones are awake and attacking you. And so it always knows who's there. And then if either you lose health, right? So the ambient cue is playing, and as soon as this robot zaps you, you've lost health. Or maybe you get the jump on them and you shoot them. At that point, they've lost health. Then it knows which robot you're actually firing or who attacked and what type of robot that is, so it plays the correct piece of music. So it switches when the first point of health is lost on either side. So it knows that this is the buzzer bot, and it's going to immediately switch from ambient to action. Like I said before, we are really focused on a strong intensity level change from a lower intensity ambient cue to the higher intensity action cue. And it works to jump up in intensity quickly because it's sort of like your heartbeat. If somebody jumps out and scares you, your heartbeat jumps up immediately, but it doesn't return back as quickly. You have to take a moment to breathe, to calm down, to return back to the original calm state. So starting out in ambient, you can, as soon as the enemy attacks, you've lost health, you've been hit, the battle starts, and then the action happens. So we immediately switch, we turn off the ambient cue, just a hard cut, and we turn on the action cue. The battle happens. We have the 8-bar loop. The battles really don't take that long, certainly less than 10 seconds, most of them even less than 5 seconds. So as soon as a character has been defeated, more than likely it's going to be the robots, because they have much less health than you. They just overwhelm you. Or it can be your character. But as soon as somebody is defeated, then it switches back from action back to ambient. But it does not do that immediately. Just in the same way, your heart rate doesn't collapse back to where it was. You have to take a moment and breathe and calm down. So the music actually crossfades from the higher intensity action music down to the lower intensity ambient music over 3 seconds. And this allows the music to resolve and return back down before the start of the next piece of music. So ambient or action music returns back to ambient, and then you start fighting the spider robots. Now, the spider robots actually jump awake. See, if you get in close enough proximity, they're kind of asleep or dormant, and then they pop awake and they start chasing you. So this is when the music starts for these robots. As soon as they jump awake, the game knows, okay, the battle has started. You're probably shooting at them, and they're chasing you. And we're immediately going to cut off the ambient piece of music, and we're going to switch to the spider action cue. And you either quickly defeat them, or music will loop around the 8-bar cue until the robot has been destroyed. And then after it's destroyed, it takes about 3 seconds, or it takes 3 seconds, to go back to the ambient cue. you can't drop from action back to ambient. It'd feel like the bottom just kind of dropped out of the mix, like the band just stopped playing. The band can start really quickly, but they really can't just stop suddenly. So, and it's really this change going from ambient to action. Sometimes it's known as battle and exploration. So you're exploring around for a whole long period of time, and then bam, somebody jumps out, fight, and then the music resolves and calms back down. And it jumps up and down and goes up and down over the course of the game. Now, there is another set of files that you will create called the music stingers, 1, 2, and 3. Each time you encounter a spider bot, you will hear the spider action music. Each time you encounter a buzzer or a mech, you will hear those corresponding pieces of music. The same one every single time will start up. So the stingers are going to play exactly in that transition from ambient to action. So at the same time, you will hear these stinger cues, and it will help hide that sudden transition. The stinger cues need to be a sharp impact. They probably have a musical component. So they're maybe a bass hit, a bass drop, cymbal crash, strong chord, strong notes, hits very hard, and fades out of the way. Think about EDM rises and drops, those kind of turnarounds right at the peak of everything, where you want it to hit. The basic stinger would be big kick drum and cymbal crash into a whole bunch of reverb. It's kind of basic, but adding modulation to it, the bass changes, things kind of decay in an interesting way to silence, are a great way to help that transition from ambient to action. So that's a lot of talking. Let's actually listen to something. Here we go. All right, I have 4 examples here. We'll play a couple of these and start up here. We have our ambient cues. We have the 3 action cues: buzzer action, mech action, spider action, and we have 3 stingers over here. All right, so we have columns for each one of those. Let me make sure my audio is set up properly. All right, that should do it. All right, let's turn this down. And we'll start with the ambient cue over here. So, it starts out with a drone, but then pads come in, bass line comes in, drum pattern comes in, there's a change in the effect over here. So, changes over the course of the cue. Very textural, very kind of more of a soundscape overall. So, at any time, the ambient cue is going to, the action cues are going to drop in and start playing. Each one of these, now, with the action cues, you have more of an opportunity for change and variation between these 3 cues. Compare that against the main loops from the 2D platformer, where we said one of the big purposes there was that they had consistent instrumentation so that it kind of felt like one band playing all the parts. Here, you are mainly or more focused on theme and motif for the different robots so that you can have variation in instrumentation. You should probably stay in the same key and the same tempo. Just as you switch around, it makes things more consistent overall. But have different variations in the sounds of your drums and your bass lines and lead lines. Can have much more variation there. So, and strength. So let me just play a little bit of this again. Again, what we're listening for is a lot more strength and power into these action cues. That's the buzzer action cue. Here's the mech action cue. All right, so a little change and variation. Certainly good changes from one to the next. Other strong changes in the third one. All right, and then 3 stingers over here. Again, the shapes should be a strong impact at the front, and it should fade out to silence quite quickly. So a bass hit with some modulation after that. That one is probably the weakest of the 3. So let me show you how this might be set up in the game. The ambient cue would play, and at some point, the action cue would drop at the same time, and the action cue would hit immediately, cutting off the ambient cue. I'll even do this. And then the stinger plays at the same time the action cue comes in. So it would sound, hopefully, something like this. I'm going to turn these down just a little bit so we can hear the stinger. And this would play there to hide that sudden transition from the ambient over to the action. Then when it was done, the ambient would transition, the action would transition back to ambient over 3 seconds. And I'm not going to make this perfectly 3 seconds, but let's just say that was the fade. That could be close to 3 seconds. So that's how the music, let's do that. Let's play through that again. Start over here. So, battle starts. All right, fight, fight, fight. Then battle ends, and it crossfades back. just in time for the whole process to happen again. And it all depends on which robots that you encounter. You will encounter the spider bot more than any other of the robots. These stingers are randomly played to give a bit more variation each time that these are played. Let's try another one here. Let's jump down. Let's jump down to the bottom one. That should work. All right, let's try this. So this is more of a progression overall, which is certainly a viable approach. As long as there's changes through that. Changes in the drums, changes in the instrumentation. And then there's 3 action cues: buzzer, mech, and spider. You want there to be strong enough difference in each one that there is an identifying factor in each one of the cues for each one of the robots. Let's do 3 stingers here. So, big hits like this work. You should probably make them go all the way to silence, not cut them off at the end. Let's see some other stingers. Some of these are good examples of bad stingers. Right, that's kind of a 90s orchestra hit. You probably want to avoid stuff like that. Just kind of like stingers strings and cymbals. This is like a timpani and cymbal. So typically it works to have a little bit more definition than that. Watch out, these are musical phrases. You don't want to make the stingers actually be phrases. You don't want to fade in the stingers. They need to hit from the very beginning. And you're not guaranteed that they're going to be perfectly in sync and in pitch. You have to make sure that these are pitched to the same thing that these action cues are doing. So I would avoid strong pitch or rhythmic stingers. Because they can actually clash a little bit if they're not played back correctly. Here's another one. This one takes a more of a kind of orchestral approach, which also is another viable way of going. Instead of doing kind of electronic, or you can do a hybrid mix of orchestral and electronic. This game kind of allows itself for mixtures of genres. So we got a strong progression there. Then we get into the action cues. More intense overall with the strings. Feels like arpeggiated, kind of like action strings. Got some good phrasing in there. But with stronger melodic phrases like that, especially with those faster lines, there's a lot of room for clashing in these kind of phrases over here. So, again, avoid those rhythmic and tonal stingers. Having strong hits, bass drums, bass drops, all that sort of stuff works quite well. So, hopefully that gives you some insight into your Angry Bots composition. What else? Suggestions. Make sure to match your composition to the genre of the game. Futuristic setting and fast pace requires big, loud, and strong, basically. Big modern instrumentation and fast rhythms. Ambient and action need to transition immediately. Keeping them in the same cue and the same tempo and time signature will allow you to jump back and forth nicely. Watch really for strong rhythmic inconsistencies that kind of make the music feel like it stutters around. Action will transition back to ambient over 3 seconds. You don't know when anything is going to happen, so watch out for the timing differences. The stingers are there to hopefully hide that a little bit. All bounce files need to loop seamlessly. That's certainly important in all of this. Interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. This is what I get a lot with these 8-bar loops. Don't put 4 2-bar loops or 2 4-bar loops in a span of 8 bars. You want to use the time for interesting changes. Take a screenshot. Set up a video capture. All right. That should get you set up for our composition here for Angry Bots. Please let me know if you have any questions on that. Your other project for this week is a composition using the limitations of the early 8-bit Nintendo systems. This session, this assignment comes with a logic session that looks like this. And this assignment has you using the same restrictions as the original Nintendo. And so consider all of your favorite Nintendo music and understand that that was done with 5 simple waveforms. Well, let's do this. 4 simple waveform generators and a 5th PCM sample channel, which was not really used all that much. But those 4 waveform channels were the very, very basics of 2 of them were pulse waves, which are square waves. The pulse waves allows you to change the pulse width or how wide those square waves are. They are 2 pulse waves. They are 1 triangle wave, which was often used for the bass. And there was the 4th channel was a noise generator, which was white noise, that was very cunningly used as a lot of hi-hats and snares to get most of your percussion sounds in the game. The 5th sample channel would be some of, if you heard some very early sample dialogue. Let's see, and Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, Mario was the referee, and when Mario would come out and count 1, 2, and 3. It was kind of it wasn't dialogue, but it was some kind of sound. The timpani and the steel drum sounds in Super Mario Bros. 3, those were all done with the basic sample channel. So, to work within these restrictions and to get a sense of where we are at now versus where we have come, to get a sense of the technology difference and all of that, you're going to write a composition using these restrictions. So, this composition, the main limitations that you will encounter, you can only use 4 sounds simultaneously. You can have more than 4 tracks, but you can only use 4 sounds at any one time. Those sounds are provided to you, so you are limited to the sounds that are provided with this session. Each one of these tracks has an EXS24 sampler on it. And in that EXS24 sampler, there are folders, this chiptune Logics folder. It is filled with different sounds sampled from the original Nintendo system, or the Famicom system, which was the Japanese version of the Nintendo Entertainment System before it came to the States. And you can use these waveforms. There's drums, there's bass waveforms, there's lead lines. So you can use 4 channels simultaneously. That means you could do drums, bass, harmony, melody, drums, bass, melody, counter melody, drums, harmony, melody. There's all sorts of different combinations. You are required to have at least 1 drum channel, and you need to have a melody. So what you do with the harmony and bass is up to you. I have a few examples here that I can play. These are some of the best examples that I've had over the years on this, and so this kind of shows you where this could go, even with simple waveforms. Let's do this. Let's do this here. I think this should work. All right. Check out the pace at which this moves here. You got this change right here. So my first recommendation to you is really fast kind of staccato lines. The sounds are not all that amazing in the libraries that you're provided. So and that's the realization of the original version of this. So the way that they got around that is really fast, very melodic lines. I was really kind of concerned when starting out this assignment that the results would be not really up to a great quality, but I ended up getting some really nice compositions overall, because since the sounds are maybe so bad, you were really focused on the composition. A lot of times when starting out a new composition in Logic, you kind of get lost in all of the presets and the sounds that you can get access to. And so you just spend a whole bunch of time switching between presets and then writing your songs around the sounds that you hear. But since the sounds are so basic here, you're really focused on your use of harmony and melody. So you're restricted to the sounds that are provided. You are restricted to only 4 channels at any one time, but you can have more than 4 tracks, but only 4 sounds can play at any one time. What else? Switching between sounds quite a bit helps this a whole lot. Let's see, I got another example here. The compositions are going to be around a minute or 2 long, somewhere in there. They don't need to be looping or interactive or anything. They're just a traditional linear composition. Here's another one that works with kind of fast lines, lots of changes throughout. really fast arpeggiations work very well. The lots of movement in your melody and your harmony. I do check on all of these that there are only 4 sounds playing at any one time, but switching between those. A couple of limitations that I don't follow for this project that you would have encountered in the original Nintendo. You can use multiple polyphony, so chords are fine. However many notes per voice you need is perfectly fine. On the original Nintendo systems, you got 4 channels. You could only play 4 notes at any one time. So to recreate a chord, they would just arpeggio through notes very, very quickly to give a sense of a chord. And your effects choice, you have a compressor, an EQ, a stereo delay, and a space designer. So, of course, you were not getting the type of reverb that you can get on a space designer in the original Nintendo. They could kind of fake reverb with really fast delay. So that's a little bit of a loose concept we play with. They could do fake delay by repeating a note at a lower volume. They got very little limited filter. And they could control the volume. So we kind of cheat a little bit with our choice of effects processing there, but that'll give you some of the ability for the same effect. And I've got one more here. This one's a lot of fun also. Again, these were all done by students working on this. There we go. Hold on. Let's try that again. So a lot of fun with each one of those. Shows you the possibilities of what you can do with this composition. So you get that, and you get the PDF along with that. That goes through all of the different ideas and how to deliver the project. So I think that is what we have in store for you this week. So we listened to some of the previous projects. We took a listen to Angry Bots and talked our way through the overall approach for the music soundtrack there. Next week, you'll finish out the sound design for Angry Bots with a whole new batch of sounds, which is a whole lot of fun because it's robots and explosions and sci-fi doors and environments and whatnot. So lots of room for interesting sound effects, and at that point, you'll have 2 full completed projects with your music and sound effects in them. So that's kind of what we're headed for. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'll stick around if you want to chat about any topics. We can do that, but let's go ahead and wrap up this, and we'll see you again next time. Thanks.